All right, welcome to the roundup for the week of December 5th, 2025. This week, wow, it was a real clash of titans. We're talking big money versus some really big problems in Canadian research. Let's break it all down.
And hey, for everyone watching along on Spotify and YouTube, it's awesome to have you with us. So let's just dive right in. This week was a wild ride, really. On one hand, we saw these massive investments in things like AI and fusion energy. But on the other hand, we've got new provincial bills that are causing an uproar and a truly startling investigation out of Stanford that has everybody talking. So let's kick things off with the good news, shall we? The big theme this week was a huge push for innovation. It felt like governments at every level were opening up their wallets for Canadian R&D. First up, the federal government is dropping a whopping $42.5 million into the University of Toronto. Now, this isn't just a win for U of T. This money is specifically for building out AI computing infrastructure that's going to support researchers all across the country. You could almost call it a sovereign AI superhighway for Canada.
And the big spending doesn't stop there. Nope. We've got another $33 million in federal funds, this time partnered with Ontario and a company called StellarX. And this is a big one. It's for establishing Canada's first ever fusion energy research center. A massive bet on what could be the future of clean power.
Meanwhile, Quebec is making a pretty savvy move on the international chessboard. They're putting up $10 million to recruit top-tier researchers who are currently working down in the United States, creating 10 new research chairs in key fields. They're basically trying to poach some of the best and brightest. Hopping over to the Atlantic, the University of New Brunswick snagged $1.4 million. And what are they doing with it? They're developing advanced magnetic materials to make electric vehicles way more efficient and less dependent on those really hard-to-get rare earth minerals. It's all about building out a stronger supply chain right here at home. And not to be left out, British Columbia is launching a new program out west. They're offering up to $500,000 for local businesses to get their early-stage tech out of the lab and into the real world for a test drive, in places like the Vancouver airport or in provincial health services. So when you step back and look at all this cash being splashed around, what's the game plan here? Well, it's a pretty clear strategy. We're talking about building our own sovereign AI capacity, getting a jump on clean energy, strengthening our EV supply chain, winning that global war for talent, and, actually helping our homegrown tech succeed in the market. And all this investment, it's building on an already really strong foundation. And speaking of which, we got to give a quick shout out to Lakehead University. They were just ranked number 2 in all of Canada for undergraduate research. That's fantastic. They're also leaders in not-for-profit research income and AI collaborations. Just a perfect example of the excellence this kind of funding is meant to support. All right, so we've had the good news, but it wasn't all sunshine and research grants this week. Let's pivot now, because the research community is facing some serious headwinds right here at home, from controversial new policies to some pretty significant security gaps. Okay, check this out, because what we're seeing here are these weirdly similar situations popping up in Canada's 2 biggest provinces. In Ontario, you've got Bill 33, which gives the government new power over admissions, student fees, even research security plans. Then, over in Quebec, Bill 1 is setting off alarm bells because it could stop universities from suing the government over things like tuition hikes. In both cases, critics are basically screaming that this guts university independence and is a huge threat to academic freedom. And on top of those policy fights, there is a massive funding crisis brewing in Ontario. That federal cap on international students has hit institutions hard. We're hearing that colleges are reporting a jaw-dropping $1.8 billion in cuts. That's leading to hundreds of programs being suspended and thousands of job losses. The financial health of the entire sector is really being called into question. And if that wasn't enough, we've got this major security headline. The RCMP has been forced to restrict the use of 80% of its drone fleet. Why? Because they're Chinese-made and have been deemed a high security risk. So now they can't be used for sensitive stuff, like protecting VIPs or in joint ops with the US. And the price tag to replace them? Over $30 million. All right, let's zoom out now and put all of this into a global context. Because what's happening in other parts of the world offers some pretty stark warnings, but maybe also some potential solutions for us. Okay, you're going to want to sit down for this one, because this investigation is an absolute bombshell. A department chair at Stanford University has been collaborating extensively with an organization called HP Star. Well,
HP Star is an alias for China's nuclear weapons program. And get this, the collaboration continued after HP Star was put on the U.S. Entity List, which is basically the U.S. government's national security blacklist. We're talking about co-authoring papers, training students, and even giving them access to sensitive U.S. research facilities. I mean, you couldn't write a better textbook example of a massive research security failure if you tried.
So how do you even begin to prevent something like the Stanford disaster from happening? Well, let's take a look at Switzerland. They're being super proactive. They're not waiting for a disaster, they're getting ahead of it. They've put dedicated knowledge security officers in each university, they've set up a national center to share info, and they're actively screening applicants from high-risk countries. Just one university, ETH Zurich, blocked 80 high-risk applicants in the last year alone. It's a risk-based model designed to protect their sensitive technology.
Meanwhile, over in the UK, you've got a Nobel laureate, Sir Paul Nurse, basically sounding the fire alarm. He's saying that the country's super high visa fees and really strict immigration rules are actively pushing away top scientific talent. And he says it's making the UK's entire science base fragile. It's just a powerful reminder that national policies can have a direct and pretty damaging impact on a country's scientific edge.
Okay, for our last section, let's get a little meta and look at the future, at some of the bigger issues that could fundamentally change how science itself actually gets done.
You know the whole peer review system? Well, it is starting to crack under the pressure. In the UK, for instance, they've seen an 80% surge in grant applications. But at the same time, the number of grants actually being funded is going down. This is creating a huge bottleneck and a massive burden on reviewers. So what's the solution? Well, the UK's main funding agency is now actually exploring using generative AI to help them out. And speaking of staggering numbers, how about this one? Scientists are now warning that with hundreds of thousands of new satellites getting launched into orbit, up to 96%, 96 of the data from our new space telescopes could be contaminated by bright satellite streaks. This could completely disrupt space-based astronomy as we know it. And you know, all of this kind of leads us to our final big picture question. It really calls into question the entire system of scholarly publishing. An international group of academics is arguing that the current model just siphons public research money over to for-profit publishers. So the question they raise is a big one. Who is our system really built to serve? Is it prioritizing profit over actual scientific progress? It's something to think about for sure. And on that note, that's our roundup for the week. Thanks so much for tuning in.